of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster. Places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones and vaster. Some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I loved, I shan't have lied. It's evident. The art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster.
Every person loses something. Sometimes it is only a key that disappears right when we need it the most. Sometimes it is time. We look back and suddenly realize that months or even years have passed without us notice. Sometimes it is a place that once feels so familiar, and sometimes it is a person. Loss is one of the few experiences that every human being shares. No matter where we come from, how old we are, or what kind of life we live, sooner or later, we all experience losing something important. Today, we are going to explore one art, a famous poem by Elizabeth Bishop. At first glance, the poem seems surprisingly simple. The speaker tells us that losing things is normal and that loss can even be mastered like an art. Sounds good, right? But as we continue reading, something begins to feel unusual. The speaker keeps insisting that loss is easy to handle, but the question is, does she really believe that, or is she trying to convince herself? To answer that question, we need to start with the person behind the poem. Because literature does not appear out of nowhere, every poem is written by a real person, shaped by real experience, memory, and observation. And in the case of Elizabeth Bishop, understanding her life helped us better understand why loss became such an important theme in her work. Elizabeth Bishop is widely regarded as one of the most influential American poets of the 20th century. Her poetry is admired for the precise language, vivid imagery, and remarkable attention to detail. Yet behind her literary achievement was a life marked by separation and change from a very young age. Her father died when she was still an infant. Not long afterward, she was separated from her mother, who struggled with several mental illness and was later institutionalized. As a result, much of Bishop's childhood was shaped by absence and uncertainty. Image growing up while constantly adapting to change. Imagine trying to understand family, belonging, and stability while experiencing separation so early in life. Experiences like this often leave a lasting impression, and throughout Bishop poetry, we can see recurring themes of memory, distance, loneliness, belonging, and loss. Of course, this does not mean that every poem she wrote is directly autobiographical. Literature is rarely that simple. However, understanding Bishop's background helps us to appreciate why themes of loss appear so frequently in her writing. And suddenly, the speaker's calm voice in one art becomes much more intriguing. Because when someone who has experienced repeat form of loss and tell us that losing things is easy, we naturally begin to wonder, do they truly believe it, or is there something more beneath the surface? To explore that question, we need to look beyond the author and consider the circumstances surrounding the poem itself. Literature is never created in isolation. Every literary work is influenced by the experience, relationship, and event that surround its creation. And one art is no exception. When Bishop wrote this poem, she had already experienced several important change and separation throughout her life. Many scholars have connected one art to her relationship relationship with Lola de Mercado Soares, a Brazilian architect who played a significant role in Bishop's life. Although the poem never directly identifies a specific person, many readers believe that its emotional intensity may have been influenced by this personal experience. This context is particularly interesting because the poem itself sounds surprisingly calm. The speaker does not openly express frustration. She does not dramatically describe her emotion. Instead, she speaks as though losing things is something ordinary, something expected, something that can be practiced and mastered, almost like a skill. Yet, when we consider the circumstances surrounding the poem, that calmness begins to feel much more complicated. Because sometimes the strongest feelings are not expressed through dramatic language. Sometimes they are hidden beneath carefully chosen words. And perhaps that is exactly what makes one artist so fascinating. With that context in mind, we can finally turn our attention to the poem itself. One of the first things readers notice when reading one art is a repetition. Throughout the poem, the speaker repeats that the art of losing isn't hard to master. When we first encounter this line, it sounds confident, perhaps even reassuring. The speaker appears to be offering practical advice about how to deal with disappointment and change. At first, it almost feels like a lesson about resilience. However, something interesting happens as the poem progresses. The words remain exactly the same, yet our understanding of them begins to change. Every time the line returns, it seems to carry a slightly different meaning. As the loss becomes large and more significant, the statement gradually becomes more difficult to accept at face value. Think about everyday conversation. If someone says, "I'm fine," we usually believe them. But if they repeat it over and over again, we may start wondering whether they are trying to convince themselves. A similar effect appears here. The repetition creates a subtle tension between what the speaker says and what readers begin to suspect. And that tension becomes even more noticeable when we examine the progression of loss throughout the poem. Rather than beginning with a major tragedy, Bishop starts with small and familiar experience. Early in the poem, the speaker advises us, "Lost something every day." Soon afterward, she mentioned lost Turkey and the heart badly spent. At this stage, the loss seems so familiar and we can manage. Most people have misplaced keys and most people have waste time. These experiences are frustrating, but they are not life-changing. However, the scale gradually increases. Later, the speaker refers to three loved houses. This immediately feels different. A house not simply a physical structure. It often represents memories, comfort, and a sense of belonging. The loss continued to expand when the speaker mentioned two cities and eventually a continent, and by this point, the poem has moved far beyond misplaced objects. This example suggests personal history, identity, and meaningful experience. Each loss feels larger than the one before it, and through this gradual progression, Bishop carefully prepares readers for the final and most significant loss in the poem. Everything in the poem builds towards the final stanza. Up until this point, the speaker appears calm, composed, and in control. She repeats, insists that loss can be mastered, but then something changed. For the first time, the poem shifts away from object and place and focused on a person. The speaker writes, "Even losing you." Immediately, the tone feels different. The emotional distance that exists earlier in the poem begins to disappear. The loss is no longer abstract, it becomes deeply personal. Then we encounter one of the most memorable moments in entire poem. Write it. That's the word interrupt the poem otherwise control rhythm. For a brief moment, the speaker seems less certain than before. The confidence that appears throughout much of the poem suddenly feels less stable. Finally, the poem ends with the praise, like disaster. After repeatedly insisting that loss is can manage, this final admission encourages readers to consider everything they have read so far. The speaker may still be trying to maintain control, but the ending suggests that some losses are far more difficult than the poem initially led us to believe. And that leaves us with an important question. What are we supposed to make of this ending? Interestingly, Elizabeth Bishop never gives us a clear answer. Instead, she leaves room for readers to form their own interpretation. Some readers see one art as a poem about acceptance. From this perspective, the speaker gradually learns that loss is an unavoidable part of life. Although losing people, place, and experience can be painful, she continues moving forward and try to accept what cannot be changed. Other readers seek something quite different. They focus on the moment where the speaker confidence begins to awake, especially in the lines, even losing you, and write it. For these readers, the poem is not really about mastering loss at all. Instead, it reveals how difficult loss can be, even when we try to appear calm and in control. There is also a third possibility. Perhaps the speaker is neither fully accepting nor fully resisting her feelings. Perhaps she is doing what many people do when faced with change and separation, trying to stay strong while still carrying the weight of what has been lost. And maybe that completely is exactly that makes the poem is so powerful. Unlike a scientific formula or a historical fact, a poem does not always provide a single answer that every reader must accept. Often invite interpretation, and different readers can arrive at different conclusions while reading at the same text. For example, some readers may find the poem comforting. They might see it as a reminder that change is a naturally part of life and that people are capable of adapting even after difficult experience. Others may find the poem surprisingly sad. Instead of focus on the speaker's apparent confidence, they might notice the tension beneath her words and interpret the poem as an attempt to cope with emotion that cannot be fully controlled. Neither interpretation is necessarily wrong. In fact, the existence of multiple interpretations is one of the reasons why literal works continue to remain relevant one time. Every reader approaches a text from a different perspective. We all carry different memory, relationship, fears, hopes, and experience. As a result, we often notice different things when we read. A younger reader may focus on the poem message about growing through change. Someone who has recently moved away from home might connect with the loss of place and city. A reader who has experienced the end of an important relationship might respond more strongly to the final stanza and the praise, even losing you. Although everyone is reading the same poem, they might leave with very different impressions. This reminds us that meaning is not created by the text alone. Meaning is also shaped by the interaction between the text and its reader. The poem provides the words, image, and idea, but readers bring their own perspective, emotion, and experience. Together, they create meaning. This continued relationship between literature and its readers help explain why one art remains widely discussed decades after it was written. The world has changed in many ways since Elizabeth Bishop's time. Technology has changed, communication has changed, the way people live their daily life has changed. Yet the experience at the center of the poem remains familiar. People still lost opportunity. People still leave place behind. People still experience separation from those they care about. And people still struggle to balance acceptance with emotional attachment. Because this experience remains part of human life, readers continue to find something recognizable with the poem. Perhaps that is why one art continues to resonate with readers today. Rather than telling us what to think, the poem invites us to reflect on our own experience of loss. When we look at the poem through a different approach, we can see how bits of life, the context surrounding the poem, its textual elements, and reader interpretation all contribute to its meaning. Ultimately, one art is about more than losing objects. It explores memory, attachment, change, and the human experience of loss. In the end, the poem reminds us that while loss is unavoidable, the way we understand and respond to it is that truly matters. I think that's all. Thank you for watching.